There's a 100% chance of recession in the next 12 months, says Bloomberg, especially if Biden keeps pumping stimulus into the economy in the form of oil reserves and student debt relief. Speaking of idiots, Conservative leader Liz Truss resigned yesterday after she attempted to also plug stimulus into the UK economy in the form of tax cuts. Maybe these two didn't watch my last video when I described how tax incentives and economic stimulus causes inflation. I tried, but there's only so much I can do. My name is Kris, and we're going to take a look at the recession news this week. In a previous video, I explained that the latest RBC and World Bank report expected a recession in Q1 of 2023. This week, we also have a report from Bloomberg forecasting a 100% chance of a recession in the next 12 months. The way to read this report goes like this. Bloomberg forecasts a recession in 12 months. That means if we haven't had a recession by September 2023, we will absolutely have one in October. But a recession doesn't go from 0 to 100. In September, there would also be a significant chance of a recession. In August and July too, albeit less than October. Given that the RBC report I talked about in the last video predicts a recession in Q1 2023, which is a difference of at least 6 months, reality is probably somewhere in between. In addition, I doubt that either model incorporated the new student debt relief and the oil reserves that Biden is racing to inject into the economy. Still, the Fed's rate hikes have so far failed to bring down inflation. Inflation clocked in worse than expected at 8.2% for the last 12 months ending in September, according to the Consumer Price Index released last week. So let's dive into student debt relief. In a policy benefiting millions of Americans, Biden announced that the U.S. government will forgive $10,000 in student loan debt for borrowers making less than $125,000 a year or $250,000 for married couples. The policy fulfills a promise that Biden made during the 2020 presidential campaign to help debt-ridden former college students. The Congressional Budget Office in September calculated that the debt forgiveness would cost the government $400 billion. What no one is reporting on is that the student debt relief is a $400 billion program, while the COVID stimulus was $1.9 trillion. It's like Biden is pumping 20% of the COVID stimulus back into the economy at a time when inflation is still running rampant from the last time the U.S. pumped money into the economy. U.S. politics is no longer about managing a country through growth and economic prosperity. It's essentially a game show where Biden gives away free money to groups of people who are willing to vote for him. He knows, and we know, that the majority of students vote Democrat. So by giving them debt relief, he can ensure their vote in the midterm elections. He obviously doesn't care that it will push inflation and interest rates higher, or that any of the students who did pay off their debt or worked hard not to have any in the first place will have to pay for it through tax dollars. He doesn't care about you. He just wants to get reelected, which sounds like something Trump would do. Something similar happened in Ontario just prior to the 2011 election when Liberal leader Dalton McGuinty canceled a gas power plant that was located in a key Liberal riding and was widely opposed by the local residents. The cost to cancel the project was $1 billion, and the move was seen as pandering to his electorate. Again, these things are criminal, and he should be in jail for it. Politicians like Joe Biden and Dalton McGuinty should be held criminally liable when they spend taxpayer money to pander to their voters. This isn't 100% the Democrats' fault. It's specifically up to Republicans to challenge these initiatives, and they aren't. The left has been really good at playing on people's emotions, but the right has a massive PR problem, as in they don't have PR. It doesn't matter how much the left screws up, the right can't seem to hold them accountable for it. This is something that the left has been particularly good at, and probably the main reason that Biden is getting away with using taxpayer money to win his election. Circling back to students. What if you were one of the students who had already paid off their debt? Or one of the students that worked hard during university to avoid debt altogether? Not only is it unfair that you had the foresight to plan and work hard, now you have to help pay for all of the other students who still have debt. You're going to pay through taxes. You're going to pay through with your grocery costs. You're going to pay with higher gas costs. You're going to pay with a higher mortgage when this money hits the economy and pushes inflation higher. Speaking of inflation, since the spring, Biden has pulled 180 million barrels from the U.S. oil reserves. At $90 a barrel, that's the equivalent of putting $16 billion of stimulus back into the economy. And that's in addition to the $400 billion he's providing through student debt relief. What is happening? Biden doesn't give a shit about anything other than getting reelected. He doesn't care about your grocery costs, that they'll go up. He doesn't care that you'll have to pay more on your mortgage. He doesn't care that you didn't get a raise this year, but your household expenses are going to go up by 8.2%. How is this different from Trump? The U.S. has traded one lunatic for another. When can we have someone, Republican or Democrat, who actually wants to do good for the country and the world? Remember back in 2020 when Trump blocked payment of a $400 million military aid package to allegedly obtain information about Joe Biden from Ukraine? Remember how that was such a big deal that the president would use taxpayer money to gain an edge over his political candidate? How is this different from Joe Biden threatening Saudi Arabia to delay their oil production cut until after the midterm election? This is what I mean. The Republicans are completely incompetent in holding the left accountable for their BS. Why is there no investigation about this? Speaking on incompetence, conservative leader Liz Truss resigned as prime minister yesterday after her catastrophic 44 days in office. Her reign illustrates that both the left and the right need a lesson in how the economy works. Liz Truss's biggest mistake was attempting to cut $45 billion in taxes. Again, what do these politicians think that cutting taxes is going to do to inflation? When an individual saves money on taxes, they spend it elsewhere, which stimulates the economy and inflation. The markets responded with a devalued pound and UK bond market. Inflation is probably one of those things where you can argue that the economy is essentially a zero-sum game, meaning that if you inject money into the economy in one area, in this case tax relief, it'll come out of another area, again, in this case the bond market, with a devaluation and higher interest rates and higher inflation. What Biden and Truss didn't understand is that all of the money they inject into the economy needs to be balanced. In their case, it will be balanced with higher inflation and higher interest rates. I can just imagine Jerome Powell sitting in the Federal Reserve going, what the hell are they doing? So what should you do with your money in the meantime? It's clear that the economy is on its way down. If you take a look at the S&P 500, we've been falling since the beginning of the year. You're probably lucky if you've had 0% growth since the beginning of the year. Even gold hasn't done very well. I'm not a financial advisor, and this isn't financial advice, but I've sold most of my stocks and I have it just sitting in cash. If the price of everything has gone up by 8%, it means that the value of my cash has gone down by 8%. But that's still better than the drops in some of my stocks, which have been close to 20%. All I can say that we have a ways to go before the economy hits the bottom, and it's going to be difficult to make any money during that period. Think about that.